Tim Black. Tim Black. Tim Black.
Yes, live on Facebook, folks. Live on Facebook.
True.
And now I'm on YouTube World. YouTube World. Anybody in the house on YouTube World? We're live on Facebook and YouTube. Anybody in the chat room? Brian Crosby. Where's Brian Crosby? Brian Crosby and Nambi Kia. Good to see you. Can you guys hear me and my guest? Guest, could you say hello?
Hello.
How are you, Brian? How are you, Brian?
Little slight delay. They're going to respond. Hey, Stephanie Chateau, Frederick Murphy. Good to have you guys in the house. Augustin Lopez. What's up, Augustin? Good to have you, my brother. Yo. You hear us? All right. Marvin C., Christian Zaldivar, Low Key, Kevin Eckert, and Kerry Holder. Hello, good people. And we see and hear you all, Tim. That's great news. Let's clap that up. All right, guys. Hello. Welcome to Tim Black at Night Show. I'm your host, Tim Black. And tonight we have a very special edition of the Tim Black at Night Show. I got a couple guests here who are doing something pretty remarkable. They wanted to come share it with you. I have Fred LaVergne. He's a scientist and engineer and a constitutional scholar candidate for New Jersey, Congressional District Number 3. And I have Alan Cannon, former deputy mayor and candidate for New Jersey Congressional District 12. Say hello to my friends and yours. There they go. We're in the house. All right, gentlemen, thank you for joining me tonight. What's going on, guys? How are you?
If I was any better, be a sin.
That's Fred,
fine.
Yeah.
That's fine.
You doing good, Alan? All right, man. Now, look, as I understand it, I know we talked about like roughly over a year ago, I think it was, about a lawsuit you guys are bringing where you want to take on Congress. Could you tell the audience a little bit about it, Alan?
Okay. The case is called LaVergne versus the U.S. House of Representatives. What this case is about is the actual First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Most people look at the Constitution and the way government is structured, but they don't really understand it because we don't teach civics in school anymore. So the way the original government was set up is that the House of Representatives represents the people. The Senate represents the states. And then the federal government has its voice by veto by the vice president who presides over the Senate and the president. So that's how it's supposed to go. So the very first thing the founding fathers did was to protect our rights. They said that too much power in the hands of a few would damage the nation. So they limited representation of each member of the House to 50,000 people. That means that your representative lives in your neighborhood. That being the case, we have proven that Congress has limited the House of Representatives to 435. They did that so that they could keep the power in the hands of a few. Now, right now, we have representatives who represent over 1 million people. That's one person who has to be given an incentive to vote in a certain way. It would be impossible to get that many people incentive to vote the way that a third party wants them to vote. So to safeguard that, the founding fathers limited representation of each member in the House of Representatives, which is our house, the people's house, to 50,000 people. In doing that, that was the very first amendment proposed. So why do we only have 435? It seems that this amendment was not certified as ratified. So myself, Fred, and a few others went on a national treasure hunt to find and prove that this amendment was actually ratified. Because the states didn't have the technology that we have now, some of them never returned their votes back to Congress. So Congress never got word whether or not they ratified them or not. So once we dug up all of these archives and we got these original documents, we published a book. The book is called How Less is More. The research was sent to Harvard, Yale, and Stanford. They all agree that the research we did is legitimate and that our documents are legitimate. There was a talk given a couple of months ago at Princeton University where Oxford attended. Oxford, listening to this,
John Locke School of Government.
Oxford listening to this talk and seeing the documentation agreed. Fred, you want to take some of this?
Well, let me expand on what Alan said. Essentially, what our founding fathers were in New York, there's a lot of reasons why they were in New York, not Philadelphia, at Federal Hall, and they were trying to come up with the amendments necessary to bring North Carolina back into the fold. They weren't going to sign the Constitution unless there were a Bill of Rights attached. And we eventually were going to try to bring Rhode Island back, too. Folks don't remember that either. 12 amendments were passed to the states for ratification. Not 10, 12. And our textbooks widely teach that there were 10. And the reason that they're teaching you that there were 10 is because the previous generations all believed that was all that was ratified. Now, our founding fathers, what we call our First Amendment rights, were Article the Third. Our founding fathers were willing, or more than knowledgeable enough to know that a future Congress might not necessarily have the best interests of the citizens in mind. So to tie their hands, they placed the Senate would be equal. All states are equal in the Senate with 2 senators, regardless of the population of the state or the size of the state. To make the People's House quasi-equal, they set an original apportionment of the House of Representatives at 30,000 persons. And it was decided that to accommodate potential growth in the country. And again, remember, this is a time when the farthest west anybody thought we were going to go was the Ohio Valley, because after that you came to France, and after that you were in Spain. French Louisiana Purchase and all that was a decade ahead. So that was as big as we thought the country was going to be. Well, our founding fathers originally set up as Article the First to prevent a power grab. Then Article the Second to prevent a salary grab. You would recognize Article the Second as our 27th Amendment. And then after that, only then could they safely protect our individual freedoms. Now, Article the First set a natural progression, a mathematical progression of 30,000 as the ceiling until there were 100 representatives in the House. Once there are 100 representatives elected to the House, the ceiling is raised to 40,000 and 30,000 becomes the floor. It's a good idea for any house to have a floor and a ceiling. Once we would get to 200 in the House, it would raise to 50,000 as a ceiling, 40,000 as a floor, forever after. Now, as Alan said, some of these states did not notify the United States government that they had ratified. But ratification and notification are 2 different words. They even appear on different pages in the dictionary.
Did we lose Fred?
And notification is not required for ratification. In fact, it's specifically part of some of the lawsuits that we mentioned that are already settled law, excuse me, in the Supreme Court. We discovered that 12 of the then 15 states, once Kentucky came in, had ratified. Now, the reason nobody knew that Kentucky had ratified is because when their records came in, they ratified June 24th of 1792. So from June 24th, 1792, Article the First is law. I think we can agree that 80% is more than 75%. 75% is the threshold. The reason we didn't know about this, when it would have been important, was we didn't get a large enough population for it to matter until the 1840s, 50 years after this was signed. And by that time, anybody who had been in the room at that time was probably dead. When it first would have been an issue, well, you couldn't go back and look it up in our archives because the British wandered through Washington on August 24th of 1814 and burned our archives. So the only records that existed were in the individual states' archives in Kentucky and in Connecticut. Now, Connecticut's another one. Connecticut didn't have a governor. Connecticut had a bicameral legislation, but no governor. So in other words, their upper house served as though it were their executive. But the upper house met in Hartford, now the capital. The lower house met in New Haven. And they met on 6-month basis. And the lower house actually ratified Article the First in the fall of 1789. And the reason nobody had found this is Connecticut's archives are structured that the constitutional period begins with January 1st to 1790. So it's filed in the wrong city in the wrong period. But fortunately for us, a gentleman that's part of this circle of constitutional scholars that we work with remembered seeing this in the 1960s in a drawer, and we called and they found the ratification vote of Connecticut. Once a ratification vote is taken and passed, it can't be undone. You have to have a new amendment. That's why when we did the repeal of prohibition, we had to actually propose and pass the repeal of prohibition. It's the same reason why 4 states that ratified the Equal Rights Amendment and tried to undo that ratification vote, they can't. And one state, in the case of the Equal Rights Amendment, ratified or their governor tried to veto the ratification. The executive of a state has no role, not one iota of their, other than as a voter, has anything to do with the ratification of a constitutional amendment. It's purely the legislature.
Okay, Frank.
So we have 12 of 15 states is 80%. This is a ratified amendment. And if it's a ratified amendment and it's the Constitution, then it's not what we may do, might do, or should do. It's what we must do. Now I'm going to shut up for a minute because I can go on this for hours. So let's let you guys have some feedback here. Go ahead.
Tim, what was your reaction to what we said so far?
Well, frankly, I'm kind of lost as to what's the goal. What are we? Okay, so I understand you saying there's some discrepancies in states being ratified. That there are states that were never ratified, so that means that they are not legally being represented or not operating as per the Constitution. What does that mean?
Tim, can I clarify this for you? I want to make sure that this is understood by you and all of your viewers. When the amendment was passed to the states for ratification, it set a maximum growth size of the House of 50,000 per district. This is a ratified amendment because it was passed by more than 75% of the states. So now it's something that it's not may, might, or should, it's must do. What we've sued is to show that there's no quorum in the House of Representatives. In order to pass a law, the House of Representatives has to have in the room and voting at least half plus one of the apportioned seats. Right now, the apportionment is incorrect. The 435 that are there represent less than 7% of the representation that belongs to you and I and everybody else that's listening to this video. Your districts are never to be larger than 50,000 persons because your congressman is supposed to be your lobbyist, not Monsanto's and not Big Pharma and not Big Oil. It's supposed to be your voice, your representative. They're your lobbyist, not K Street. And you're going to know your representative in a smaller pool of around 50,000 persons. And we certainly proved that it takes big money out of that last year in the primary. We took 32,760 votes with a $600 expense. So I'm fairly certain.
Can I add something, Fred?
Please, Anthony, I insist you do.
All right. Tim, when you ask, what does this mean? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay. When you ask, what does this mean and what's the overall goal? The overall goal is to actually have representation. When you draw down the number of people that one representative can represent to 50,000, that means that all the urban districts, without gerrymandering, get full representation. That means the Trentons, the Camdens, the Flints, all of those places, now they have one person in Congress that actually represents their neighborhood. And that was the intended goal.
It also gives the same representation in a state like Montana, where you have 1.3 million people and they've got one person in the House.
Right. Or somewhere like Puerto Rico, who has one person in the House representing over 1 million people. How can one person speak for 1 million people? That's not
even have a vote.
Design.
Puerto Rico doesn't have a voting member. They attend, they're not a voting member.
Right.
So
we need to represent too.
So what you're saying is that we don't have enough representation, or we're not being represented by the number of representatives that we should have, and that's because of what?
It's because of a failure of our government to realize or recognize that this is ratified. And it's been brought to their attention for 5 years. The discovery of the ratification happened 5 years ago, almost 6 years ago. And they've known since 2012. And I can promise you that every sitting member of Congress in 2012 knew, because I personally delivered DVDs that explained with the documents everything that happened during that election cycle. Mm-hmm. So every sitting member of Congress knew. No action was taken. Of course, why they don't want this done is this destroys lobbying. Your elected representative is supposed to represent you. And to have correct data, we have to have the full apportionment of the House. Right now, since January 3rd of last year, the House of Representatives has not yet convened. That's what we're suing on the basis of. We sued initially on the Internet privacy law that they tried to pass through, and we then modified it to deal with the American Health Care Act, the wealth care bill proposed by my direct opponent in the Republican Party, where, you know, let those with pre-existing conditions be damned, let them eat cake. The purpose of the lawsuit is to give the people back their constitutional voice. This is not us saying we want this. The Constitution requires this. Requires that no district be larger.
Here's the thing, is that when presented with this, the duty, according to the Constitution, the duty of every sworn member of Congress is to follow the Constitution.
Correct.
It's not us. It's not us making this up. It's not us asserting this. It's not us creating this. This is the Constitution driving this. And every seated member of Congress, their first duty is to obey the law and obey the Constitution. That's their first duty. They only have one legislative duty that people don't even know. Their one legislative duty is to pass the budget. That is the only legislative duty they actually have. All of this other stuff that they make up is just fluff. But to know that your legislative duty is to follow the Constitution. Your law-abiding duty is to follow the Constitution. Yet since January the 3rd, members of Congress and the Senate have been passing laws illegally, knowing that they're not backed by the Constitution. That means every talk that they walk out on, talking about healthcare, talking about equal rights, talking about investigations, none of those actions, you have to understand this, none of those actions have backing by the Constitution. They can't even impeach Donald Trump, because to call for impeachment, they have to have 50% plus one to bring the articles of impeachment. They don't
I'll give you an example from this weekend. 7% is roughly 1/11. It's really closer to 1/12 of the fraction that's supposed to be there. If Nick Foles had walked on the field all by himself with the Eagles and won the Super Bowl, guess what? You got 7% of what you're supposed to have. This belongs to you. Every single one of you watching, this belongs to you. This is your birthright. Even people that came here and became citizens. And by the way, when somebody swears an oath to become a citizen, they swear to take up arms on behalf of the Constitution. You and I get that because we're born here. They have to swear to renounce any and all other ties and to be willing to take up arms to defend and protect the Constitution of the United States.
And it's the Constitution they're defending, not the Democrats, not the Republicans, not the blacks, not the whites, not the Christians, not the Muslims. It's the Constitution. Because the Constitution is what makes you a citizen. The Constitution is the piece of legislation that's tied to everything that we do and everything that we are.
It trumps any other legislature.
For someone to say that immigration is an issue and not even know the law, the constitutional law doesn't permit a president to dictate legislative law according to immigration. The immigration is based off of what the people say and what the states say, based off the House of Representatives and the senators.
An executive doesn't legislate, neither does a judge.
That's it.
Why we have separate branches in the government.
This is about the Constitution. That's what it's about. You can't change laws until you have people in office who will change laws. And you can't get people in office if the only way you could get an office is to buy your way in.
You know I agree with that.
With the Constitution set up the way it is, you could walk around your neighborhood, not spend a dime, knock on every door. You got 6-7 months.
Proved that last year, didn't we?
Knock on every door and talk to people like you're supposed to. Find out what they say and then be their voice. Don't be your own voice. You don't even have a vote. You're a voice.
Wow.
What you think doesn't matter. What the people want is the only thing that matters. And to take this point all the way home is that when you work for somebody, your boss comes in and tells you what to do.
True.
Your boss gives you a paycheck.
Right.
There's nowhere, only in America, can somebody who works for you make you pay money to see them.
Congress is sent to serve, not to rule. Somebody needs to make sure they understand that.
When you understand that the Constitution was built for service, was not built as a dictatorship, was not built to make somebody honorable this or honorable that, and for you to bow and scrape every time they enter the room. It wasn't built for that. It was built for service. There was no such thing as the early presidents leaving the White House with more money than they went in with.
Jefferson left
broke. Businesses to serve.
Jefferson left broke.
And he didn't steal furniture.
Or silverware.
You know, I'm laughing, but it's not funny at all. But it's just, I know you guys are so very close to this issue. It just sounds so fucking unlawful. Well, you know what I mean? It just sounds like
Tim, how unlawful is it for someone to violate national security, commit felony election fraud, go into court and admit to that fraud?
You talking about my runaway, right?
Defending the Constitution, say nothing?
Yeah. How in the hell? Hold on, I gotta ask you. Let me ask you this, gentlemen. How has this been allowed to perpetuate itself all these years? We have these constitutionalists, like I'm thinking Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz hangs his hat on the Constitution. How do you miss this one?
The same way 225 years. Go ahead. For 225 years we missed this. And the reason we missed this is it's not, I don't want to call it a comedy of errors, but it's a comedy of coincidences. I don't really think it's that funny. The British burned the archives, so there was nothing for anybody to look for. There's at least 4 times in our history when this was rediscovered and quietly swept under the rug, with phrases attached like "here there be dragons," or this would dilute the grandeur of the office. And then, as Alan pointed out, we went to 435. We went to 435 because the Congress, in an astounding bipartisan agreement, set the apportionment at 433 with a statute, which doesn't trump the Constitution, allowing 1 more each for Arizona and New Mexico as they came in. Arizona was the 48th state, New Mexico the 47th, 1911, 1912. But it's been held at 435 because they realized after the 2010 census that we now had black men voting, and we were about to have women voting and black women voting. And that was going to make a huge difference in the demographics in an election. So they locked it at that, and then they've been gerrymandering. I mean, Jersey, when I was a kid, we had 15 congressmen. Now we have 12. We have a larger population, and yet we have less representation. Now, why is that? We have a lot of minorities in New Jersey, and the powers that be wanted to make sure that representation was, how was it Orwell put it? Some are more equal than others. And again, at 50,000 per district, we can elect the best and brightest instead of the richest, whitest, said the retired white banker.
Here's the other concern, is that the art of gerrymandering would be decimated. Because once you limit the amount of people, that means the places where they put all their forgotten, all the ghettos, all the hoods where the most people live,
Right.
That becomes its own district.
They get the same voice as Society Hill in Philadelphia.
And here's the other part. With this case the way it is, not only does Congress not have the ability to make law, it doesn't have the ability to redistrict the states either.
What's important
when they hear about this and they start saying, oh, we got to come up with new districts, you don't have the authority. Not only do you not have the authority, it gets even better than that. All of those additional seats have to be at large seats.
At least until the 2020 census is finished. Now, Tim, what you're going to want to know about that's not real public, and I promise you, they're going to be upset when I tell you about this. I met with a gentleman from the Census Department. He did not know who I was.
Brad, before you get that story, let me say something. Before you get that story, let me say this. Okay. They don't teach you in school that the sole reason we have a census is to determine how many people are in the House of Representatives.
Wow.
They don't even teach that. So how many censuses have we had?
Every 10 years.
Right.
The decennial census, meaning 10 years, it has other uses, but the primary purpose is to set the apportionment of the House. Alan's absolutely correct. Our group actually owns a large fraction of the 1940 or 1840 original census. It's not even in the Library of Congress. We have the original. There's copies. You can look it up at the Library of Congress. We have the original. Every time we've gone to these documents that the Library of Congress doesn't have, we've gone to the original. In fact, we've acquired many of these documents. So when you look at the exhibits, this book, which explains everything, is 600 pages long. And it's not like reading, but it's important. There's 40 pages of 8-point text endnotes to cover all the facts that are in the book. We've gone to the original source every single time. This is not what Fred and Alan and Scott Newman and Len Marshall and Eugene Martin LaVergne, who wrote the book, are trying to do. This is what the Constitution says we must do. And again, when it's the Constitution, it's not may, might, or should. It's must.
Wow.
The Department of Commerce is not happy about this.
Now,
can I tell the story or stop me for a minute? Go ahead.
Hold on. Tim, when you look at the fact that every member of Congress knows about this case, every media outlet knows about this case, it is astounding how someone could stand before you, run for office, and not know about this case.
They don't. They do. They all know.
Every person who wants to be reelected knows about this case. And how do we know that? Because we served them, and their lawyers are fighting us right now trying to stop us.
You see this ridiculous 5-inch binder? There are 8,000 defendants in this case. You know why? Because they're interested parties. Every sitting member of every state legislature received this either in hard copy or digital form. Every single member of the House has it. All the states' attorneys general have it. All the state secretaries of states have it. And naturally, the Department of Commerce has it. But you asked, how could this have gone on so long with nobody knowing? And the answer is defined best by a story my brother tells about the great-grandmother, and she had a recipe in the book on how to prepare a roast. And her niece or whatever called up and wanted to know, why do you cut the end off the roast? I don't know. So they went back and they checked with the great-grandmother who's still living, and she says, oh, I never had a pot big enough. This 30, yeah, I cut it off and cut it separate for the dough. Why do you cut the end off the roast? Because I don't have a pot big enough to cook a whole roast. The funny thing is, one of the biggest first arguments anybody raises, the first thing everybody says, oh, it's too many, we'll never get anything done. You got 435 there now and only 30 or 40 do anything anyway. If we increase that to 300 that are doing something, we're still way ahead. The second thing they raise is the cost. Well, if you go to the federal budget in 2007, the cost of the Congress was right around 4 seconds of the year. That's how big the budget is. That's why people don't get to see a budget anymore. Because if we did, we don't have enough light poles in Washington to hang them all. And the space that's necessary for them to meet. Well, first off, the Constitution only requires that they meet together on the 3rd of January to convene. Things can be done about how the meetings take place, But there's space down there that offers seating for 8,500 that would be adequate and sufficient for this. And ironically, it's named for one of the Democrats that was involved in the 1911 decision to make it 435 people. So if you have a positive pregnancy test, did you become pregnant when you peed on the stick, or were you pregnant because of back when you, there you go. The fact that we don't know about it doesn't mean that it didn't exist. Okay. But now everybody does know about it. The courts know. The journalists know. I had a journalist talk to me one day, tell me for 40 minutes, she explained our case to me, not knowing who I was. Then I introduced myself. Same thing happened with the census, and I was leading up to that with Alan. I was talking to a gentleman who was here from the Republican-appointed Census Bureau. He's working under the Republican-appointed Secretary of Commerce. And he was here in New Jersey, and his job, as he explained it to me, is they want to pull off the 2020 census in the first 90 days of 2020. And the reason for that is when we prevail in this lawsuit, these seats have to be filled or we can't conduct business. Wow. They'll have to hold at-large elections in all 50 states based on all 50 states' constitutions, and believe me, we check. That's the process that's necessary until they can change the gerrymandering, and they can't change the district locations until the next nearest census. Well, we're past 2015, so they can't use the 2010 census. They have to use the 2020. They've been charged at the Census Bureau to get this done in 90 days so that the 2020 election, they can find some way to try to take back control of this. Because if you've got 6,233 seats, you got a pretty good chance in 50,000 person districts that you might elect a couple of independents, a couple of libertarians. Everybody's going to have a seat at the table. Okay? And right now, registered voters in the United States, 18% are Republican, 31% are Democrat. Now, that varies up and down by state, but nationally, that's the number. 48% of the voters in this country are unaffiliated. And right now, that's probably, we've got leakage in both parties right now based on how the leadership that we had in the 2016 election, trending away from the major parties. They lose control with this, and they're horrified at the thought of what that means, both financially and for legislation that's bought and paid for already. They've got things that they've guaranteed to these lobbyists that they've got to get through. And if we suddenly change the paradigm in the Congress to where if all 435 voted lockstep with each other, they only represent 7% of this decision. Can you imagine being a lobbyist that's been working 35 years on K Street, and Monday after this is over, finding out that congratulations, you have 100% access to 7% of the Congress. Uh-oh. Mm-hmm. You mean we might actually vote the interest of the people? That's what the Constitution's for. This protects us from exactly what we're dealing with. And this nightmare that we had to serve is keeping them all up at night because they're going to lose control back to we the people. This is a nightmare that turns out to be real. This belongs to you, belongs to Alan, all of the constituents, belongs to the citizens of the United States. And we're going to take this government back. Most revolutions begin at the point of a gun and end at the point of a pen. We started this one at the point of the pen. I would like to keep it.
I'd like to add that when push comes to shove, every elected official in Washington knows about this case. That's the takeaway. They know about this case. Their lawyers are fighting us in court. Most of those people sitting in those offices, they're lawyers themselves. It is like that one of the highest crimes a lawyer could commit, to not practice law to the best of his ability. He can be charged in a courtroom with that. So why do we have lawyers, people who study law, people who make law, sitting there ignoring the law and expecting you to vote for them? Every last one of them. I put a challenge on Twitter. I said, there is not a member of Congress or any elected official that will debate me. And I meant that. And the reason I could say that is because of this case. This case is about representing the people. And not one of them, not one, has the balls to step to me, man to man, look me in my face and tell me that they care about the people when we got this case to prove that they don't.
Galileo went before the Pope because he was charged with heresy. And he had taught his students that the earth went around the sun. Pope disagreed. Doctrine of the Catholic Church disagreed. Galileo was tortured mentally and physically until he assented to say that the sun was the center, or the earth was the center of the universe. But as he rose up, he whispered under his breath, "Nonetheless, it moves." Not being willing to see the truth doesn't change it. Not agreeing with mathematics is foolish. Mathematics is a black and white issue. 80% is more than 75. 50,000 is a maximum when we have 768,000 as the average. We're not compliant. Half plus 1 is 3,117. 435 is not 3,117. Nonetheless, it moves. It doesn't matter whether you believe this, any more than if you believe in climate change or gravity. If you don't believe in gravity, lift both legs. Tell me what happens. What are you going to do then? Sue the city for building the sidewalk too close to you behind? At the end of the day, we will prevail on this because it's fact. Even the old argument, fake news, a lot of the folks, as Alan mentioned, a lot of the legislators are standing against this because they're being told to. And it's not even that they know or don't know. They choose not to see. But like I said, when they have a little plus sign on that pregnancy test, you didn't become pregnant when you feet on a stick. You just discovered that you were. 5 years ago, we found Connecticut and Kentucky's ratification. Any action taken to block that is a violation of the oath taken by these individual judges, these individual congresspersons, and every lawyer that stands and takes the oath for the Bar Association. Swore to uphold their Constitution. All of the members of our military swore to uphold, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. Our incoming citizens swore this. Okay. The sitting president swore this. They can be taken as word. This is in U.S. District Court, District of Columbia, before a 3-judge panel. And they're down to the only objections they have are procedural, and they're almost over. Their quiver's out of arrows. And the facts are on our side. You know what they say in courtrooms. If you're on the facts are on your side, pound the facts. If they're not on your side, pound the table. They can try to make fun of us, but the fact of the matter is, this isn't a tinfoil thing, and it's not a red pill, blue pill. Mm-hmm. This is historical fact. This is what we were supposed to have, and I'll be damned if we're not going to have it.
Wow. This is deep stuff. I mean, of course, I can't think of anyone who wants a true democracy, actual democracy in this country, who would hear this and then discount it and say, well, they don't care. Of course we want more representation. Of course, that's what we all fight for. And of course we believe that lobbyists have too much power. But I guess it's just daunting knowing that they don't want to give up their power, gentlemen. And do you believe that
what they've done to us individually during this period over the last 5 years? See what they've done to my brother and I.
I don't know.
The other three to a lesser extent, but I won't bore you with that here. All I can tell you is when you read anything negative about me, this was done to me, not by me. Lack of due process. Am I correct, Alan?
If something happens to me, it ain't because I did it. I'm sitting here. Here's the hardest thing. When you serve in the military, I was in the military for 25 years. And for 25 years, I was willing to die for my country. Now, I'm a veteran. I'm outside the military. It is harder to live for your country than it is to die for your country. Because everything that I was willing to give my life for, now I'm fighting for my veterans who need their benefits. I'm actually fighting for the Constitution that empowered me to serve this nation. Every veteran,
you're absolutely right.
every airman, every person in the military is putting their life on a Constitution that these people want to ignore.
Alan, without the 13th Amendment, you wouldn't be a citizen. And to be blunt, if my ancestor on the Scots side that came here and served in the military and the Navy had not done what he did, which resulted in his getting the Medal of Honor, he wouldn't have been a citizen. He served in our military.
Citizenship, Fred.
As a Scot.
Black people are the only people who had to have their humanity legislated.
You're absolutely right. And we still haven't done that for Native Americans.
Wow.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And if people understood that, you know, it's easy to say, yeah, but my school book said this. Well, I got news for you. When I was a kid, my school books didn't say that man had landed on the moon because he hadn't yet. If we didn't know, fine. Now you do know. You can get angry with your kid when they don't know what's right or wrong. You're supposed to teach them. Once they know, all bets are off. You can make a mistake once.
Every parent, every good parent demands that their kids do their homework. That's a basic parenting skill.
Mm-hmm.
It's our job.
Okay. It's our job. It's our duty as a parent. How can you elect someone to office who not only won't do their homework, but is making sure you don't do it either?
Gosh. Wow. Yeah.
Nonetheless, it moves.
Wow.
I didn't do my homework, so I'm going to snatch yours, and I'm not even going to write my name on your homework. I'm going to throw both our homework in the trash.
Or the guy from the class down the hall is going to come in and say, here's the answers. Use this. And here's $10. This is
brothers.
Is core to the salvation of this country. What's amazing and should be most amazing to everybody involved. I mean, the five of us are the messengers. We're the spear carriers. We're the sicarios. We brought the message. Our founding fathers put this on the table in 1789. And they didn't put it at the end. They put it before our personal freedoms.
Wow.
Because it was more important. They knew if they didn't make sure that they prevented a power grab, that some future Congress might be less patriotic than they were. And we've certainly seen that to be true. So those visionary gentlemen, and they were absolutely flawed. You know, the 3/5 compromise alone shows you where we were missing the boat there. If you don't know, you don't know. Now we know.
Yeah, if we go by the Constitution, and if you gentlemen are correct, and I have no reason to doubt the accuracy of your book, or the accuracy or the legality of the lawsuit that you bring, it would be a lot harder to bribe. I don't know, how many representatives should we have?
It's funny you should say that, because in order to get it, that's exactly what we talk about. This destroys lobbying. Even if you did bribe those people in a district of 50,000, is your congressman's new Mercedes going to be standing out, you think? And a 2-year term, which means guess who's not going back to Congress? That's a bad investment for the lobbyists, isn't it?
2-year term, he'd have to move out of the neighborhood.
He might get a ride out of the neighborhood. The way they used to handle stuff like this was the two babies.
Or they'll all end up in one neighborhood together, and they'll still have one voice. What people need to know, you need never take my word for this. These are facts. Facts matter. You go to the webpage, you can actually download the lawsuit and read it for nothing. You can't find it on any newspaper site. And unless you have a paid Pacer account, you can't read it. We'll give you a web address and you can download the documents. Don't take my word for it. This isn't a red pill, blue pill issue. It simply is. And because it is, we've stood against those that try to stop us. And I've paid a terrible price for it. I won't deny it.
Amazing.
But my country matters more. I explained this to my ex-wife. I said, there are things in life that are a matter of life and death. There are some things that are even more important.
You're breaking up, Frank.
In my life.
Wow. Gentlemen, tell people where to go to find out more information. I'm sure there are going to be people who want to look into this.
Well, I have it on my campaign website. Can I give that address?
Sure.
Alan? You want to do that?
Any address? Oh, okay, sure.
FJL2018.org. Simply hit release. You can read the press release that all the news media outlets have had. That's the rewrite of one that's 5 years old. All the media outlets have this. Like I said, I've had reporters tell me the whole case. FJL2018.org. .com will be up and running this week. We had a denial of service attack. It destroyed it. I'm actually reconstructing the entire site with our staff over this weekend. Yeah.
Wow.
Another place they can find the documents, they can either go on my Twitter timeline. I have a pinned tweet.
There you go.
The documents. My Twitter handle is AJC, the number 4, others. And you can find me on Facebook. The documents are also on Facebook, on my Facebook page.
Alan, your Twitter feed is probably the easiest place to get these documents because it links right to the same documents.
Mm.
You know,
And
like I
you
said,
put,
don't take our word.
put my Twitter handle down in the comment section of this video once you finish.
I can definitely do that.
Tim, the amazing thing about this is that there's a very small universe of people that would have even have had the ability to know to look for this. And I won't bore you with it now, but all I can tell you is there is no question that our lives have all led the 5 of us together for this to happen. There's no question. So I've got to give props to Scott Newman, constitutional scholar, and a brilliant man. Leonard Marshall, activist, scholar, brilliant man. And my younger brother was probably the top constitutional scholar in the country. And what they've done to him and tried to destroy his reputation. But he was Lautenberg's attorney, Bradley's clerk, attorney for the NAACP and for the Democratic Party. They don't hire you because they don't want you to do a good job. They hire you because you do the best. And what they've done to him is unconscionable. The book can be found on my website, Alan. If you put the link up for the book also on your Twitter handle.
Yes, I will.
And you have thousands and thousands of followers on Twitter that have been watching you do this. And I want to thank you for getting that done because this message means more to me than my life.
They've been just trying to educate the masses. That's what we do.
Wow.
Well, like they say, if you think education's expensive, try ignorance.
Well, gentlemen, Fred and Alan, I got to tell you, I was when we first spoke, it just seems overwhelming, but this conversation has definitely been illuminating. I think that you have really piqued the interest of a lot of people, and this video will be up forever, and it at least can serve as a way to educate others. You can link them out to it, Alan, and you know, save yourself some typing.
I'll share this on the congressional page. We expect to win the primary, even though they threw a carpetbagger in front of me. Mm-hmm. The Democrats are so afraid we're going to win, and then investigate things like the Delaware River Port Authority and the Casino Redevelopment Authority. And they're right, that they'll stop at nothing. So I'm the Democrat in the district running for office. There's a Democrat not in the district also running for office. And we'll give Mr. MacArthur his walking papers in November.
Wow.
Thank you.
I just want to pull that up again. I'm going to, all right, folks, this is what you need to do to find out more about this. Go to fjl2018.org, or you can just go to Alan's Twitter handle, which I have here for you. I'm going to also put
AJC
this in
for others.
AJC for others. That's right. The number 4, AJC, the number 4, others. At AGC for others, guys. And wow, definitely, guys, I want to thank you for coming on and educating people to this lawsuit. When's the public hearing? You know, I'm in DC, so.
Well, I'll come down and see you when it's scheduled. Right now, we're going through all of the little various motions that they've tried to do to slow things down, but organizations from other states around the country are actually trying to join in on the suit now that they've read it and understand it. And even people that originally didn't believe it to be true, that are other constitutional groups, are now embracing this, because it's like those stupid dolphin posters. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's just too big. Once you understand this is real, and then you understand the implications, then you're demanding it. And this audience is growing greatly. That's why they're afraid to put it out in the media. It's something you can't explain in a 30-second elevator speech.
Right.
But the easiest way to put it is, right now, for the lawsuit itself, no quorum means no legislation. So it's rather urgent that we not only address this, but the states fill those empty seats. We can't run a budget. We can't pass a law. All the stuff that from last January 7th or January 3rd, not actually law, can be challenged in court. If you put articles of impeachment against Donald Trump, you can actually use this lawsuit as a defense. Because until we have half plus one, we don't have a House of Representatives. They don't have a quorum. Not my rule. That's what the Constitution says. Don't take my word for it. Do the homework, like Alan said. You got to do the homework.
Wow. Well, that's it, guys. Thank you for joining me tonight. Once again, go to fjl2018.org and go to AGC for others for more information. Thank you, guys, for joining me. I appreciate you. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for the opportunity, Tim.
You got it, guys. You got
Tim
it.
Black.
No.
Tim Black.
Wow.
Tim Black.
My hands explode. This is something. This is something. True.
You got to do take it 2 feet down.
All right, guys, and we are done and ending now.